Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Hannah Devlin, I'm the Science Editor at The Times, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here for the RSA's very special lunchtime lecture. Just before we begin, there's a little bit of housekeeping. We're filming today, so welcome to everyone on the live stream as well. Could everyone make sure their phones are on silent so that that isn't interrupted? If you want to get involved in the discussion online, the hashtag is RSA Marshmallow. And one further note is that we'll be showing a little bit of video during the talk, which we can't broadcast outside of this room, so please don't film it or take pictures and tweet them just for that little bit. Right, so now housekeeping's over. I'm very, very pleased to announce today's distinguished speaker, Walter Mischel. Professor Mischel holds a professorship in psychology at Columbia University. He's one of the world's most influential psychologists. He's recipient of countless awards. He's author of more than 200 scientific papers. And as you will all probably know, or hope will know, he's the inventor of the original experiment in the 1960s, the marshmallow experiment. And as you can see, we're running our own small version of this experiment today. So those of you who still have your marshmallow by the end will be able to trade it in for two outside at the back. And I'm not sure how strict the RSA is going to be about enforcing that, but that they ought to be if they want to try and stimulate our self-control. So today, Professor Mischel is going to tell us a little bit about his classic experiment, but more importantly, what he's found since then about what influences our self-control and the genetics of it and how we can improve our self-control, perhaps most importantly. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Mischel. Look.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me well? No problems? I'm delighted to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. One of the questions I'm often asked in venues like this is, why did I write the Marshmallow Test, Understanding and Mastering Self-Control at this point? And the answer is that I think an enormous amount has been learned about the ways in which we all can have much greater freedom, much greater choice than has been previously believed. And that what has been discovered about the plasticity and malleability of the human brain has enormous implications for how we think about human nature, how we think about ourselves and our children, how we educate them, and how we deal with the various challenges that have faced us since Adam and Eve lost paradise, and before that, in the voyages of Ulysses and so on. So the problem of self-control, self-discipline, self-restraint, as well as the challenge of how to do this in a way that still allows us to have the pleasures and the passions of life, because the two in no way contradict each other, is really what the research that I've been involved with for a very long time has been about. I want to give you as concrete a sense of what the so-called marshmallow test is. It didn't develop as a test, and it was initially motivated because I was trying very hard to understand something that I had trouble making sense of, really grasping, which is what was happening to my three very closely spaced daughters who were age 3, 4, and 5 in the early 1960s when I was a young professor at Stanford University. And I saw these three young ladies go through a tremendous transformation that all of us who have had children see in our children, which is how they change from being these hugely impulsive and quite uncontrolled, adorable, and also complicated and difficult challenges and joys in the early years to becoming the amazing people that they begin to be when they're 4 and 5 and 6 and are actually self-instructing themselves, and we can have real conversations with them. and they're able to control themselves and to wait, if we're lucky. And I realized I didn't have a clue about what enabled this, what made it possible, what was going on in their heads and in their behavior that allowed this transformation to occur. And of course, in America particularly, this was the height of behaviorism. So in the 1960s, to be talking or thinking about what goes on in the mind, not to mention the brain, was considered a non-scientific subject. So the challenge was to find a method that would allow one to study this systematically and begin to be able to do experiments on what makes it difficult or what makes it easy for children to delay gratification and to take future consequences into account. The situation that we developed was one in which the very first thing we did was to build a trust relationship with the child so that the child clearly understood that the promise maker would keep his promises. What I would like to do is show you briefly a video that was taken not at the time the experiments began, but about 20 years later by a postdoc of mine working in a South American country. And the kids that you'll see are 4, 5, mostly 5 and 6-year-olds who are, in this particular study, have already made a choice that they would like to have 2 Oreo cookies later rather than 1 Oreo cookie now. So they've made the choice, and they're sitting with a tray in front of them. On the top of the tray, on one side, are the 2 Oreo cookies they'll get if they wait for the lady to come back by herself. On the other side, on the left side, is the 1 Oreo cookie they can have right away. All they have to do is start eating it, or ring the bell that's there too, and bring the lady back, and then they get the 2, and it's over. And the kids clearly understand this. They clearly are in control of it because the goodies are really already there. So it's a very simple situation in which the measure is how long do they wait. So if we could have the video for this. to not reveal the identity of the child who did it, because of the hundreds and hundreds of children that we put through this situation, there was only one who went for all three. But, but he went for all three in an enormously interesting, to me, way. And what he did was he opened one Oreo cookie at a time and rapidly licked out the inside. Then he replaced the two cookies on top of each other and went to work on the next one. And then he did the third one, and he did this with amazing speed and with terrific accuracy, replaced each exactly in the position from which he had taken it. And then, as this sequence ended, he sank his head innocently into his hand and looked out at the door like a method actor in total innocence. And what I found particularly interesting is that when I showed that video at a university lecture, the provost, the rector of the university, shouted out, "Give that guy a scholarship when he grows up," which I think raises profound questions about the morality of the administration. I would like now to discuss with you what these findings mean, how we can think about them, what the implications are for how we think about human nature, self-control, and so on. So would you be kind enough to join me?
Thanks very much. That was, I found those videos absolutely hilarious. It definitely brought to mind a few children that I know. So one thing I was interested in, when you first published some of your results showing the amazing way that just the results of these experiments could predict the trajectories of the children in life, a lot of people took from that the message that if you can predict something so young, it must be genetic, it must all be there already. And it'd be interesting just to hear what you make of that and what you've learned since then.
I think that there clearly are major differences that we all see in our children, beginning very, very early in life, in their temperament, in how easy they are to calm, in how easy they are to live with, in how much they torture us or let us, get on with our lives. There's no question that there are major individual differences in the ease with which children can do the kind of thing that we saw on the videos. But the experiments, not only that I've done, but that have been done by many other people on a quality that you saw in those videos, which is called executive control or executive function. What's executive control or executive function? It means that you are able to have a goal in mind. I'm waiting for the two cookies. I'm waiting for the two marshmallows. You're able to inhibit interfering responses. I mustn't ring the bell. I mustn't think how yummy and chewy and sweet the marshmallow would be or how good the cream filling would taste. Otherwise, you ring the bell or you eat it. And you have to be able to use your cool brain, that is your prefrontal cortex, and the attention-controlled areas in that to do exactly what those kids were illustrating, which is to transform the effortful, difficult situation of sitting alone in a barren, boring room and enduring a delay of 15 minutes or 20 minutes in this particular case, which is certainly almost unbearable to watch unless children are doing what they're doing. The ones who ring the bell are the ones who aren't doing that. They're the ones who are staring at it and are unable or just simply don't have the skills to transform the situation and do what you saw the successful kids doing here. So what we're seeing is the manifestation of executive function in an early form. And executive function is an absolutely critical cognitive skill. So some people find it much easier to acquire. Some people find it much harder to acquire. And it also depends for what. That is, you may be very good at waiting for marshmallows, but have other areas in which there are hot spots in which it is not at all easy. So the notion that willpower is a generalized trait that you either have or don't, and that you have in some amount, is, I think, completely contradicted by the kinds of findings that the research that I and others have been doing. Which means, in terms of the question you're raising, Hannah, that yes, our DNA matters profoundly, but to even think about the question of heredity and environment in the way that it has been traditional to do, which is it nature or is it nurture? Is it all genetic? Or is really to not be aware of what the developments have been in genetic work in the last 20 or so years. In the field that's now called epigenetic, it's become very clear that the genes that we have in the genome have to get activated or deactivated by what used to be thought of as the junk in the genome, which is actually the switches that turn on or turn off the genes. And those switches are influenced enormously, not only biologically by what we eat and what we smoke and what we drink. They are also influenced by what we think and what we feel and how we deal with stress and the nature of the toxic stresses that we experience and how we interpret them and so on. So there is a continuous interaction between our biology and our psychology, which has, to me, become one of the most exciting things in recent science, because it means that we are actually able to be agentic, to have a role in influencing how our genome plays out. I mean, there are constraints on it, of course. There are all kinds of conditions in which we are unable to control. But when it comes to this kind of self-regulation of emotions and the self-control of temptations and so on, we really are in a position to influence how our lives play out and what we make of our lives.
Yeah, so basically it's not, we're not born with a set amount of willpower. It's something that as we get better at it, we're probably getting more rewards. And
exactly. It's something that's acquired, that's learned, that's easier for some than for others, and it is influenceable. I mean, to me, one of the most exciting things that comes out of the research of people that I've collaborated with, not my own work, is the recognition of the really remarkable plasticity and malleability of the prefrontal cortex. Now, this is not something that is just there and there's nothing you can do about it. This is something that is open to change, and even in adults of an age, methods like mindful meditation.
So the prefrontal cortex, that's the bit that's making the decisions about whether to take the marshmallow or not.
Yeah. The prefrontal cortex is the part that takes the future into account. The part that is able to say, well, if I ring the bell, then I don't get the two that I want.
Yeah.
And what I refer to as the hot system, and all of this is discussed and described in great detail in the book, The Marshmallow Test. It begins with these experiments. It goes on to a really much, much larger story about how mind and brain act together to allow us to create the narratives that become our lives.
The thing I love about that video is that, as you said, that you see the kids that succeed are the ones that find something to keep themselves going whilst they're waiting. And I think that is quite different from the way we think about self-control normally. We normally think about willpower as what you saw in the ones that failed, who were just sort of staring at the thing thinking, don't press